Welcome to the 18th of my behind the screen videos. Still, as ever, streaming and recording Notepad because it works, and I still can't get Microsoft Office to stream properly. It streams a white background where you can see the mouse cursor, and occasionally it will highlight bits of the UI when the mouse cursor drifts over them, but other than that, it doesn't really show anything. So we're stuck with Notepad for now. I'm going to try a different streaming software and see if that works. As I mentioned in Friday's stream, I was ill. It turns out I had a cold over the weekend. At the tail end of it now, so my throat's still a bit, froggy, and I may cough a little and snuffle. I'll try and mute the mic when I can feel that coming on, but hopefully it won't be too much. And I ask your forbearance with that. But as I say, I will try to mute the mic if I feel it coming on. Today's topic is villains and how to create villains. As ever, the idea being that I will give some theory. I'm not really reinventing the wheel here. I'm going to be largely repeating what I've read in a fair number of books and online and seen in videos and stuff, but then also putting it into practice for you guys with practical examples, so to hopefully help with your villain design and schemes and whatnot. I will have to be making brief mention of a previous video. You can take that as self-promotion or just as a useful reference point. Either one is fine by me. Sorry, cough. As ever, all the videos are up on YouTube for your viewing pleasure if you want to find out more about what I'm talking about. It shouldn't be that critical or crucial that you've seen it though. And the example given throughout this stream video will be the big bad from my home game, which as ever is going on in a few hours' time this evening for me, and is the purpose of the recap and whatnot. So, to recap the previous session of my home game, the players, having met the tree spirit, asking them to find the treasure from further in, and then entering a glade with a huge tree in the center, and noticing some items of their equipment being moving at swift speed towards this tree, quickly discovered that their equipment was being carried by tiny fey creatures called quicklings, having two characters with histories tied to the Fae through growing up in an elven enclave, and with having at least one character with a high Arcana score helps with identifying things like this. And some of the party seemed intent on stealing the items back, while the rest of the party seemed intent on just racing the quicklings for it at the quickling's suggestion, which they duly did. The monk stepped up to the racing line and handily won, which was good because I calculated the maths out so that they would handily win, moving faster than Usain Bolt. And while that was happening, the rogue / warlock and the sorcerer / warlock went to try and steal their stuff back, but were beaten back by a quickling guard. So they got their stuff back. They continued on, and they entered another clearing. This was a clearing whose only main kind of point of interest was a pedestal in the middle of it with a small carved wooden box on top and a small hillock pushed up against the pedestal. And then as the party sorcerer warlock approached, the hillock moved and stood up and revealed itself to be kind of a plant wolf hybrid. I used the r/monster day, I think it is, Glen Guardian, pretty sure that's the name of the creature, which is essentially just like it is a plant wolf hybrid, which has some mild spellcasting ability. And there was a few tense moments of was it going to attack or not. And in my mind, if the players didn't provoke it, if they didn't go for the wooden box, if they just moved on, it'll be fine. There'd be no encounter. But players will be players, and they decided to try and steal the box. I say players will be players. Again, the two with ties to the Fae and to elves and whatnot, they were happy to let it be and move on. But the rogue warlock and the sorcerer warlock wanted the box. So a fight broke out. The wolf teleporting, tree striding between tree trunks, casting its spells. The party did resolve the conflict without killing it. They levitated it with the levitate spell. The cleric blinded it, and then they ran bravely away before the spells ended. And so far have not actually. They opened the box and discovered a 3 kind of marbles with animal fur in the middle, but haven't made any attempts to identify what they are yet, if I recall correctly. And then the session ended with them hearing the sound of a little girl crying, and encountering a pool of water with a ornate-looking great sword at the bottom of it. And Apollo, who the party sorcerer warlock, who is the only one that hasn't met a Rusalka, was the one who charged off ahead because he was like, I'm in a fairy tale, I'm going to rescue the girl. And got hit with her suggestion to come and play with me. Which is exactly what happened the last time they met a Rusalka. And the look I got from my partner who plays at the table was incredible when she realised what was happening. So the Rusalka did her usual thing of from the Creature Codex by Cobalt Press, I should say. Casting Suggestion, which the Sorcerer Warlock failed his saving throw, and then Water Walk so that they can walk on the water to her, and then when he gets to her to play with her, she's going to drag him down to the depths and drown him. Or try to. And again, if the players... if the players decide to just rescue Apollo, and we ended the session with a Storm Chaser, my partner's monk, grabbing a Burning Storm Chaser, I should say, grabbing Apollo, the Sorcerer Warlock, and then I believe the Rogue Warlock readying kind of like a defensive action to repel the Rusalka. If they just decide to leave, the Rusalka's not going to leave her pool of water. She literally can't. And then they can get away free. If they continue to fight, obviously they're going to have to go through the entire combat encounter. She's not going to let them leave easily, and she's not going to, for reasons known only to me, she's going to fight to the death. Because she can hide, she turns invisible if she's in dim light, and there's plenty of if she's underwater and in dim light, and there's plenty of that dim light around through tree shade. But for reasons known only to me, she's not going to fight. She's going to fight to the death, and hopefully, the purpose of this encounter is to demonstrate to the players how much they've progressed since they last faced her. I'm trying desperately I have been trying desperately to remember the amended stat block I gave her so that kind of they can see how easily they can defeat her now. This isn't intended to kill them. It's just supposed to, as I say, show them how much they've advanced and progressed. And then after that encounter, they'll be finding the Carred Guards and the Cave of Mirror people, and then the end of the quote unquote dungeon with the locked gate and the riddle. So that's where we're up to. So, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Also, actually, give me 1 more second. I've just realised I need to do something. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yes. So the Rusalka, unbeknownst to the party, when they last met her, they defeated her. They almost lost the party fighter in the process, who at this point I believe is the only non. Oh no, there's a cleric since the cleric joined. So we've got 4 multi-class characters and 2 single-class characters in the party. The last time they faced this Rusalka, they almost lost the party fighter. But they did beat her. They did reduce her to 0 hit points. And when she died, time stopped for all of the characters. But 2 of them did manage to pass their saving throws to see what happened next. And a woman wearing a rusty dented plate and kind of wispy white robes stepped through a portal, and behind her was a man on a stag with a sword dripping fire, a horn helmet, and a cloak made of leaves. And obviously the players don't know this, but that's actually the big bad of the campaign. Sorry, one sec. And he is the example that we'll be using throughout this video. One sec, I'm just going to get some more water. I'm getting through it quite a bit as I get over this cold. Where was I? Yes. So the big bad. So the big bad is a Fey Lord called Thorn Sunchild. I love the, I guess the common parlance is extraness of the Fey. I love melodrama, and obviously, like, I'm attracted to certain flamboyant ways of doing things by DMing and stuff. So to me, when you create a villain, well, actually, way back to basics. Go back to campaign writing first. So primarily, this is obviously going to lend itself more to fantasy themed campaigns. These tips, anyway. Well, the examples. The tips should be fairly system agnostic, but the idea being that when you write a campaign, and this is obviously how I write things, I don't really write a campaign. I create a villain, or I create a series of villains, one probably the primary to begin with at least, to act in the background and to have the players kind of come organically upon their schemes and interfere with them. Because this way, the players are more, the players are in the spotlight, not the villain, and the players have all the agency in the world to do whatever they want, but obviously, depending on the actions they take, the villain may or may not succeed in their plans. So the style of campaign writing, really, you need a good villain. And this is going back to my campaign writing tips. It was like guided, sandbox, or the middle road. So originally, when I started this campaign, I was very much in the players are going to go from A to B, and they're going to do X, Y, Z along the way, and that's the story we're telling. And I quickly realized, what have you, because you never stop learning. And the more you GM, the better you get at it. Like with anything, I quickly realized that that's not the game. That's not the style of game I like to run, and it's not the style of game I want my players to experience, because it's very dictatorial's the wrong word, but I don't want to be the director of the film. I want to be the co-creator. I want to have the story by, and then the players are the actual writers. So I took the original idea I had and reworked it to fit the new, more flexible campaign framework I was creating. And then about that time, Mike Mills posted on Twitter, who is seriously worth a follow if you're interested in the nuts and bolts of D&D mechanics, and obviously D&D in general, posted his ideas about how you shouldn't have a story that just dictates where the players go. The players should be free to create their own stories and things like that. So it was definitely I read that at the right time. And so I've kind of cribbed from the Apocalypse World and the Power by the Apocalypse games, with the idea of fronts, because those games you don't really prep for. So fronts are just things happening. With D&D, a front is most often going to be a villain. Hence the examples I'm going to be using here, but you could probably adapt a lot of this to suit those. And there's loads of stuff online I'm sure about writing compelling fronts and stuff. But for the purposes of this will be villain writing for D&D, because that's the examples I can give. So I took my idea of Thorn Sunchild and reduced it to the points that you see on the screen: history, motivation, the purpose of the villain, or the theme and the mood that they're exploring, and their behavior. And I'm not saying that you'll get all four of these, because you might not get all four of them, and you certainly don't need all four of them to start off with. Sorry, I stumble over words occasionally. Because I don't think you should have everything fully worked out to begin with. Discovery through play is one of the greatest things that the tabletop role-playing hobby offers, in my opinion, anyway. So I started with motivation and behavior. Motivation and history kind of do link together. I had the very bare bones history. Like, I knew why he was doing what he was doing. And then kind of just went from there. And a lot of the time, since I've been creating secondary villains and stuff, motivation definitely will influence behavior. Just so it's easier to understand, I would move these around. One sec. Sorry, cough. Obviously names and stuff you can sort yourself, but so I'll try and break down what I mean by each of these points, and then with each one I'll give you an example. So again, this is in no particular order. This is just the order I wrote them down in, just so you're aware of that fact. So history is hi Dynadus. History is kind of what led the villain to the point that they're at the start of the game. So if they're a PC, their backstory. If you're starting with your villain's history, then you're I don't want to call anyone out. I was just idly checking the users to see if anyone had joined the stream. What was it? Yeah, so if they're a PC, it's their backstory. This is essentially what the villain was doing before the game. Before the campaign, or before the story starts. And if you kind of work this out, then that can lead to their motivation. It can lead to influencing their behavior or the purpose / the theme, the mood that that you're going to be exploring with them. I will say with purpose / theme mood, it's not entirely necessary. It's just something I always like to consider. I, as anyone who knows me in real life, can attest, I'm a huge fan of the Wood of Darkness, or now Chronicles of Darkness game lines, and a large part of each of the different kind of lines there is exploring different themes and moods, and using those to define the game play in a way. So I very much am influenced by theme and mood when I'm creating characters, and obviously in other videos I've talked about having a purpose for something and what that purpose serves. I don't think you should include anything in a story just because. It should always have a reason to be there. Without a reason, it just feels groundless, and can lead to inconsistencies and things. But definitely what the villain was doing, the story starts. Before the story starts, can influence their purpose in the story and the theme and the mood of the story that they're exploring. But it's not just their backstory, it's also kind of relationships with other characters. And a lot of these things you can also adapt for just NPCs in general, if you need to flesh them out. Most of the stuff I have internalized anyway, so when I need to create an NPC on the fly, I thought I randomly spaced. When I need to create an NPC on the fly, it's kind of like, what's their motivation? What's their behavior? Do they know anyone in the immediate vicinity? And that helps to create a person who feels like they belong, which my players frequently say kind of like they're astounded at my ability to create NPCs, and to me it's nothing special. It's just what would someone in the situation realistically behave and act like. But that's by the by. So relationships with all the characters, it could be PCs, but probably just other NPCs. And obviously, if it's a villain, they're it could be either other major or NPCs, major or minor NPCs. Sorry. I suppose. Oh, what am I doing? It's all going wrong. Both major and minor. Because no character exists in a vacuum, and if your villain has a history, because I mean, they're not going to feel fleshed out if they don't. They're just going to be a pastiche, really. They will have relationships with other people, and they're not necessarily positive relationships, but they're definitely relationships. So it's kind of potentially an important thing to consider, and gives you an opportunity for the players to find out about the villain through how other NPCs see them, whether that's through public perception or through personal interaction. And then kind of, I suppose, wrapped up in the backstory part of it is past actions. Oh, one sec, chat. My God, I think we can all agree that colds suck. Yeah, so past actions, and obviously this will be influenced potentially somewhat by their behavior. But when I mean behavior in terms of the bit further down the list, I mean how they will react to the PCs, how they react to their schemes being thwarted, things like that, rather than their exactly, Kenny. I'm folding events and actions to be taken in with behavior. And probably include the important current event stuff there as well. But I can definitely do subheadings for those. What am I doing? Slash schemes and reaction to PCs. There we go. God, colds. Why do they exist? Stupid rhinovirus. Yeah. So past actions being just kind of as a major important events in their history, ways that they've reacted to them, that kind of thing. Things that can be logically extended to their behavior in terms of the campaign plot, overall plot, or overall storyline of that villain. But not necessarily identical, because as PCs develop, so do villains. Again, nothing's fixed in stone until you say it, which is kind of my creed when I GM. So to provide a history example, my Archfey, Thorn Sunchild, King of the Ember Hall, his backstory is that his sister was originally even further back. So he's a dryad who arose from the same tree as his sister, so they're twins. Arose at the same time, awoke, whatever the right term is for dryads. But kind of people automatically followed her rather than him, and so he wanted, in the way of the Fae, he wanted the adoration and the obedience, and so schemed to depose her. As Fae do through political alliances and bargains and whatnot. And then, so what he was doing before the story started was he successfully deposed her. He was simply ruling the Cinder Hall. He was ruling the area of the Feywild that they controlled. His past actions established his willingness to succeed, the lengths to which he'll go to. Yeah, blooming. I like that suggestion, Kenny. We'll go with blooming. The lengths that he'll go to get what he wants. And in this instance, obviously, he made alliances, and I didn't define the alliances. I just decided he'd made them. So he'd made alliances with things, with creatures who could help him. Relationships with other characters necessarily, because he's a Fey being, and in the Feywild he's removed from the world. So the only real relationship he has is with his sister, and obviously that's not a positive relationship. But and then as like another example, one of my secondary villains is a team of necromancers who, before the story started, they bound at least two of the gods and siphoned their power. And they have no relationships with other characters but the gods and each other, and their relationships with each other are very much kind of, I respect you for the power that you have, but I will kill you if I can. I should point out that my campaign is called Waking the Gods, because the players are literally freeing the gods from a variety of prisons to help save the world from something that's coming in campaign 3. I planned a 3 campaign story, with each campaign being an act. Who knows if we'll get there, and if we do get there, it probably won't be in 5th edition D&D because of how long it takes to do anything. So while they are the secondary villains, they're kind of the more overarching villain, I guess, in a way, for this campaign, with Thorn being the immediate threat and them being the background element. So in a way, the backstory can define motivation. Motivation is usually quite simple to determine, and the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition does include a table that you just roll on for random motivations. So I'm not going to, repeat that here, but you've got things like power, money, lust, emotional connection, so anger, love, that kind of thing. I'm separating lust and emotions. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best thing to do, but there we go, I did it. But also you could have things like prophecy, being controlled by others, and certainly while this is what I generally do for big villains, whether that be for a one shot or like a short term story or the full 1 to 20 campaign I'm hoping to conclude sometime within the next 5 years, it can apply to minor villains. So one of the minor villains in my campaign was actually, that was a nested thing. So the first quest I gave the players was that they had to arrest a noble who was inciting civil unrest, and so they went and arrested him, and he was actually being blackmailed by his father-in-law, who is actually a servant in a warlock way of Thorn Sunchild. So kind of nest schemes all you want, really. So the first layer, his motivation was he was just being blackmailed. He didn't want his secrets to come out. And then the blackmailer's motivation was that he was given power and expected to abide by the terms of the agreement that gave him the power. So he has no choice. And then I just put etc. As an aside, I once made the mistake of asking my French teacher what the French for etc. was. The look she gave me was withering. I didn't make that mistake again. So Thorn's motivation here is it's still power. He wants the crown. He wants the throne, and yes, he's got them. But he does, because of how I like flawed characters and flawed villains and grounded villains, I guess. Like, he still feels threatened by his sister, and yeah, sure, he deposed her. She's no longer in the Feywild, but she's still alive, so she could return and reclaim what's hers. So his motivation here is just power and fear, really. What the players don't know, because they've not had any opportunity to find out, because I've only just started introducing Thorn himself, is that his sister is hiding in the city that they're based in Scour, as a noble, and that's really all I can say here without spoiling the behavior side of things. So moving swiftly onto the behavior side of things, and I'm conscious that this is probably not going to take the usual hour I like to stream, so I might just build a villain using this framework as a formal example, perhaps, depending on how long it takes. So behavior. So important current events and schemes is obviously how the villain acts at the time of writing, or I guess planning is possibly the best. No, writing. I think writing is the best way of phrasing it, because planning implies a lot more preparation than I usually use. And their current concerns. And thank God the lorry outside has turned its engine off. Oh, the truck outside has turned its engine off. So that's kind of, whenever you come back to the villain, it's good to have an understanding of, and again, this is all my opinion, your mileage may vary. I highly encourage you to read to engage with as many resources as you possibly can about things like this. I'm not authoritative in any way. I know there's things that I don't address that people think I should. There's areas of my GMing that are weaker than others. Similarly, I think there's probably areas of my GMing that are stronger than others, but no one's perfect. And as I say, we're all learning. So I guess don't take this as gospel, but kind of having a good understanding of where the villain is at that time, even if it's just kind of this, before every session, you kind of take a moment to think, what's the villain's current plan? Will it impact the session in any way? And a lot of the time, probably no, if you follow this campaign style of writing style of campaign writing, planning, whatever. Because the villains are very much in the background, and the players are driving the story through their choices and actions and pursuing their own goals. And the villain will only really arise when their goals intersect with their schemes. Now, the trick is, of course, if you find that your players are pursuing goals that don't allow the villain scheme to interact with them, probably throw the villain out and try to start again. I don't like having hanging plot threads. I don't like having narrative inconsistencies. But there's a point at which I've realized that kind of the villain as created is not working for the story we're telling. And the players probably will not notice if the villain just disappears. Because they're having fun telling the story they want to tell. So, as I've mentioned before in these videos, I think knowing when to... Yeah, continuity. Knowing when to drop something that isn't working or is detrimentally affecting the game is a useful skill. And a non kind of villain related example of this, my players decided that they wouldn't take the downtime I offered them and wanted to RP each and every day for a month in real time. So we play every Monday for a few hours. So in a month of real time, we got through 4 days in game out of the 3.5 weeks that they had to wait for a deadline. Their boss was going to bring them an item, but it was going to take 3.5 weeks to get that item, or something like that. And I was kind of sticking firm to this deadline. Like, they'll get to the deadline, they'll get the item, they'll go and do what they're supposed to be doing. And the game kind of suffered for it because there was no progress, there's no impetus. My original plan called for the players to get the item, go to Javik's estate, which is where they're finally going now, and then when they came back, the city would have had a coup would have occurred. The city would be different to how they left it. People would be affected, dead, possibly injured, dying. And I realized that that would have been cool, and they could have tried to infiltrate the city and stuff. My fixation on keeping the story as the way I wanted it to go, just to preserve narrative continuity, with my plan, really didn't have to be like that in any way. They made it clear that they wanted to wait. They made it clear that they weren't prepared, that they didn't want the downtime. They wanted to engage with the world during those 3.5 weeks, however many. And that's how they ended up in the Shadowfell. And I think it was a better story for it. And then when they came back out of the Shadowfell, having taken downtime in the Shadowfell, because that's what everyone does, No, it was less downtime, more just traveling from point A to B. Just gonna read Kenny's comment in chat. Okay, so I'll address the second point first. They wanted to they essentially just roleplayed shopping and research, which was fine, but as I say, it took so long because at that point I had 5 players and they just split up 5 ways, which is why it took a day, like a 2.5-hour session to get through a day of game time. To the first point, my original idea was that they would just take the downtime and we would just fast forward and they'd get some skills done and learn a bit more about the world through, hurried explanation of things. Because they just, at that point, kind of, the party had gelled. So over the nearly 2 years that we've been playing, 3 of the original party have left, and I was planning on using that downtime to see how they worked together. Need motivation such that players and characters are always moving to that next big thing. Yes, and that was what I realised, Kenny. I have never run a campaign of this length before. I've always done shorter term campaigns just because of time dictation. My God, my cold has ruined my ability to think. Because that's the time I've had. But my characters are heavily into just character role playing and in character conversation and development, and that's fine. I'm happy to take a back seat if they are enjoying the character development stuff. But yeah, my plan was that they could use that downtime and we could just have like a montage scene of the downtime of them doing stuff together and figuring out how they work together, because the backgrounds that I had for the characters, the 2 that joined, to replace the 2 that left originally, didn't lend themselves to teamwork really, or to functioning as part of a team and staying around as team members. And so I wanted to give them an option to have a kind of a montage of meeting the team and getting to know them and working together properly. It's not that they're trouble players. How to phrase this? More, they made the common first-time player mistake of lone wolfing the character backstory, and it's fine now. They've settled in with the group. They've got reasons to stay around because like those 2 players actually happen to just be personal friends, just coincidentally looking for a D&D game. I have encountered that behavior before though, and just no, these were kind of like the new players to the game. They just made mistakes that a lot of people make in their first characters' backstories, and it's fine now. As I say, they're personal friends. I know them as people, and I worked with them to give them reasons to stay around because they wanted to stay with the team. The actual players wanted to stay, but they realised that they'd given their character no motivation to stay. This has been one hell of a digression. But I solved all that, and the game was better for dropping it. But having the grounded villain, going back to the topic, although I will 100% respond to any comments in chat that seem, useful. Yeah, I mean, I just at the outset, because all the players were new to the game, they were employed by the city to work together as a team, and then obviously adding people with that dynamic is difficult. Yeah, there's free reign and then there's free reign, and I'm more for the former, to encourage characters to team up and stuff. But it's all good now. All the characters have established relationships with each other, and that's fine. Yeah, having the grounded villain, having a villain who still serves a purpose to the plot / is interesting. Sorry, motivation's the wrong word. I gave them reasons to stick around using the established behaviors from their backstory, which then led to increased character relationships, if that is any clearer. And as I say, if your players are not pursuing things that intersect with the villain's schemes in any way, drop the villain, because otherwise the villain's going to succeed at their plan. It's just a question of whether or not the players care or encounter the results of the plan. So definitely something to, at least in my experience, in my opinion, important to consider regularly. Yes, survival is a very good motivation. Survival is the only reason my bard stuck with the party originally, because they were her meat shield, and she was intent on using them to keep herself alive. Which is probably not the best reason to be in a player party, but it worked for her. If events / schemes. Oh yeah, she was all about faking friendliness. And respect. She stays around out of respect now more than anything else. They have earned it. If event schemes don't intersect with players, and then apostrophe to indicate the players' events and schemes. Rewriting / scrapping. And then their reaction to the PCs is how they, my interpretation of it is how they change their schemes in relation to what the players are doing. Which is probably related in some way to the motivations. Oh yeah. That's primarily why I sorry. So Kenny in chat, as ever, is making salient, useful points. And I'm aware that my voice is deadpan, and that wasn't intended in a sarcastic manner. It's an honest opinion. Making the point about motivation for low-level characters being like money is a perfectly valid one. That's why I started the game with them working for the city as a team. Kind of like they had to stick together for money reasons. It's a low gold setting, and then of course I made the mistake of giving them access to a gallery of fine art and an abandoned house to steal, but that's by the by. For the most part, they aren't going to be getting that much gold in terms of party funds freely anyway. They'll get bits and pieces here and there, especially when they start exploring further from monster hordes and things, where it makes sense that the monster would have money. So it's kind of reaction to PC's actions driven by motivations and can alter their end goal. So essentially, Kenny, what you're saying is that you have a premium currency. Sorry, that was a horrible video game industry joke. But it's definitely a good way to address the problem of money issues. So behavior in the context of my campaign. So my bad guy, Tharn Sunchild, his scheme, plan, what have you, is to kill his sister. And originally, the way he was going to do that was to infiltrate the city, and he was infiltrating the city by giving power to this noble, using that noble to depose the player's boss, who happens to be, coincidentally, the head of the secret police, one of the ruling council of 12, to take her seat so that then he could influence the city into making itself vulnerable to him. And because he is Fey and functionally immortal, he has got time to burn. He doesn't care how long his scheme will take. He's going to pursue it to the end, unless anything happens. And of course, PCs happen. Oh, 1 sec, need to blow my nose. Kenny, I might steal that idea. Oh, that's cool. That's cool ability. And certainly with the themes of the campaign being, well, the main mover behind the scenes being Faye, having a campaign about favors instead of finance is a cool thing to consider. So his plan is to kill his sister. He's got time to spare. So his original plan was to, as I say, manipulate the ruling council of 12 by getting a seat at the table through pawn into making the city vulnerable to him. Unfortunately, for reasons that I don't know if I really want to explain right now, because they're not set in stone. I don't know how important they are. Suffice to say that I've got plans for the city of Scour that will ensure it survives no matter what happens, but it can be changed by the results of the player actions. So it's not a defenseless city, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So his scheme may not have worked anyway, or the way he wanted it to, but he was trying to get a seat at the table, weaken the city at the very least. The players obviously stopped that by 1, arresting the pawn of the pawn, and 2, scaring the pawn out of the city. So his reaction is to take a step back from the situation and consider his next moves. Now, because he is a schemer, he is adept at manipulating people and things, I never expected him to have only the one plan at a time. So he just moved on to his next plan. Like, the pawn's still there, the pawn is still alive, that's who the players are moving towards an encounter with if they ever get there, trying not to kill everything on the way. Kenny, I have seen your comments. I just want to follow this train of thought to its conclusion. So as I say, he moved on to his, not backup, because that implies he only had 2, but the next plan in his list, which is conquest of the city. This is largely because I reasoned that he's Fey, so he's driven by passions, he's unpredictable, melodramatic / extra as all heck, and he's a schemer, so he's not going to do it himself, he's going to get other people to do it for him. So his chosen tools in this instance are orcs. So he is assembling an orc horde, the likes of which has never been seen in this world, to destroy the city as a green tide. And he doesn't care how many orcs die. They're not his people. They're just pawns. So this is what I'm slowly introducing to the players. And I've got a fairly good understanding of him as a character. So when the players if the players kill Javik, because they don't have to, they can take him prisoner. But if they kill him, Thorn's going to appear and offer them a bargain that if they stop interfering in his business, he will let them live. And he's faced, so he'll obey the terms of that contract. Of course, it's up to me if the players interfere in his business by giving them the option to pursue things might be related to his interests, like going after the Orc Horde, for example, that is trying to destroy their city. But there are people who could deal with that in their stead, and I'll be making that perfectly clear to them if they want to do other things. But regardless of that, if the players do pursue the Orc Horde, or if they decide to honour the terms of the agreement and not go after the Orcs, his end game, which is what I sort of envision kind of the level 20 quest being, is he's going to summon the Wild Hunt just to storm the city and get his sister and execute her. And then this tears down the walls between realities and lets the Far Realm start encroaching, and that's where the other two campaigns come in. Depending on how that goes, obviously the players might stop that, and I have to go back to the drawing board for the other two campaigns, and that's fine. We've had a great story in this one. So I've got 3 schemes for him: the Pawn, the Orcs, the Wild Hunt. But then depending on how the PCs interfere with those things, obviously that's all subject to change. This is a fairy tale writ large in terms of his involvement, in terms of the necromancer's involvement. So their motivation is power, their behavior, their current scheme is just maintaining their power. It's waning, especially as the players start releasing the gods that they've trapped. So their scheme is, at the minute, each of them is trying to find a way to prolong their power in their immediate area. So one of them the players have already killed, and it was a goblin who was focused on kind of controlling people through plant spores. Controlling the dead through plant spores, correction. And so he's dead. And the players have got to go to other places, and one of them is tied to the... Again, Kenny, I have seen your comments. I'm just trying to follow this through to its end. One of them makes constructs and is looking for a way to power those constructs to... and then kind of essentially transfer his consciousness into a construct to live forever. One of them is a flesh sculptor, so she's trying to make kind of a body that can sustain her until the end of time, etc. And then the other one's a spellcaster, so it's just pursuing lichdom. That's all well and good. And I don't need more information about those schemes just yet, because the players aren't investigating them. They're not currently anywhere near where those schemes are impacting, but they will be eventually. And then I'll figure out how they're impacting the local area. Hi, Roblox. So a lot of people are new to this channel, and that's perfectly fine. Kenny is an old hand at the channel. As long as everyone at the table is having fun, you're probably not messing it up at all. The whole purpose of this channel, these Monday streams, is to offer advice, and then if you catch me during my other streams, I'm happy to talk D&D with you, because it's my hobby and what I get paid to do part-time now, which is incredible. I've got 17 videos like this up on YouTube already that you might want to pay attention to. It's channel name the same as Comrade Bubbles, and there's a link below this video player, below the video player, to my tabletop website, where I have information, introductory articles for players and GMs alike, which I really need to revisit and update because some of the advice I give is horrible. So before I move on to the next section, really just kind of to wrap up behavior, figure out how the schemes impact where the players currently are in the world. Don't do stuff that will never come up in play because it's wasted time you could spend developing other things and improving other things. To address your question, Roblox, I want to say Player's Handbook, but I'm pretty sure it's also in the DMG. It has recommended DCs for tasks, but really it's just anything for your judgment. So average roll on the D20 is obviously 10. So, and human average is an ability modifier of 0. So a 10 is a task that anyone can do, that anyone has a realistic chance to complete. And then 15, you probably need training or really good luck. And then 20 is absurdly difficult. And then you can obviously have numbers between those. A lot of the time in published materials, they'll have DC 11, DC 13 checks or saving throws. With saving throws, it's usually included in the monster. Yeah, DC 14 to 16 at level 1, really kind of, even if they're proficient in a skill, they're probably going to struggle for it to hit that consistently. As long as everyone's having fun, I guess there's no real problem with it, but just something to consider. And this is, I'm desperately scraping my cold, addled brain to come up with these figures, so I could be off the base a little bit, but I think not. I don't know about hitting DCs consistently, but if you're trained in a skill, you should be able to do that skill consistently, I guess. So, like someone who's clever and has read a lot, a historian should be able to recall information. But as Kenny says, it does depend on a lot of factors, like in a trap, the lethality of the trap, or with information, the difficulty of finding that information, how well known it is. It's very situational and is definitely up to your decision. As I say, a DC 10, DC 11 is kind of a routine thing, and then 15 and above is definitely harder. If you're ever concerned about the DCs you're setting, if there's a chance that something could have interfered with that, so like they're trying to track something, make a stealth check for the thing they're trying to track and then use that as the DC. Go back to Kenny's original statements that I was putting to one side. Okay, so with raising a rank to be immune to poisons and disease and stuff, that does exist for some classes. They just get immunity to poison, the effects of age, things like that. Oh yeah, I was totally gonna, if they broke the agreement with the Fey Lord, they were totally gonna actually have a mechanical drawback for doing so, because that's how the world works. And to me, for Fey, heavily influenced by Changeling the Lost. But I would obviously, I need to think about how that would manifest. If your body did not fall apart, your brain could live for almost 200 years. That is really cool. I think I read about a turtle living like 23 days without its body. Like, it's just its head. That doesn't surprise me, though. Yeah, Kenton's advice is solid. upstaging me on my own channel. Really, it just depends on how, on the tone of the game you want to set, I guess. So if you want to have a harder, grittier campaign, then yes, have the higher DCs and things like that. Because messing with the mechanics of the game can influence the feel of it. So to have that example, higher DCs across the board, it makes it grittier, higher stakes. There's more tension involved. Will they succeed? Won't they succeed? Will they find what they need? Won't they? But having low DCs and high lethality, it gives it more of a cinematic feel to me. It's something I do play around with occasionally at the tabletop myself, usually for one-shots and stuff, but because it's kind of the action hero trope of you easily avoid the bullet flying towards your head, but you know that if you hadn't, that's really going to mess you up. Right now, I'm explaining how I go about creating villains and stuff like that, and I'm almost at the end of it, and then there'll be a full summary. But essentially, obviously there are loads of ways of writing campaigns and creating storylines. I let the players pursue their own goals and have villains acting in the background. Kenny, I generally, if the players actually put the time and effort into being observant, I'll let them do it, but they will definitely have to try to do it without tripping the traps or careful consideration of potentially preventing themselves from progressing through the dungeon. I'm not going to say yes, it's a cool day, you can do it. I'm going to say yes, it's a cool day, you can do it, but so what's on screen right now, Roblox, is things to consider when creating a villain. So the villain's history is the top section, the villain's motivation, the middle second section, the villain's behavior, third section, which I just finished discussing, and then the purpose and theme and mood. So Kenny will probably be able to attest for this. I think he's seen enough of my material at this point. But I like things to have a purpose, to ground them in the world, to have the consistency behind them. So that largely this, you don't have to have this, because their purpose is that they're a villain and that they're acting against the characters usually. But having a thought about, yeah, sure thing, Kenny. I don't know how much longer I'll be streaming, but it's great seeing you when you drop by. Thanks for helping out and providing opinions and things. The alternate point of view is really useful, so enjoy. What was I guess? Having a having an idea of what purpose your villain could serve in the world beyond just being an antagonist can be a useful tool. As I mentioned at the beginning, and a recap for people who've since joined, I like exploring themes and moods through everything, through and this is like overarching themes and moods and themes and moods that only apply for one scene, one character, one dungeon. Example of this is exploring the kind of the despair and otherworldliness of the Shadowfell for a few sessions, with the theme and mood being despair and alien unknown events. Okay, so because that is quite an important question, Roblox, So a long rest, a party cannot benefit from more than one long rest in a 24-hour period. As written, this is all as written, and the long rest takes 8 hours, 6 hours of sleeping, and then 2 hours of light activity. If you do more than an hour of heavy activity, you have to restart the rest. A short rest takes an hour, and obviously spends hit dice, and certain class features refresh after that hour. And everything happens at the end of the rest. That is important to note. So, I mean, technically, well, there are requirements for long rests. If you don't long rest, you get a level of exhaustion. If you get 6 levels of exhaustion, you die. Yes. However, Elves trancing is BS. It's perfectly fine as written. It's not BS. It's just a very cheesy way of doing it. However, I hope the mic did not pick up on that. Builders outside. What I tend to do, if it's getting to the point where they're long resting after everything and taking kind of like days to do anything, like a dungeon crawl, have not necessarily a full-fledged villain, but have something in the background that is working towards a goal that's negative for the players, and then when they take the day out just to rest, obviously that's a day that they're not, that they aren't working against whatever this thing is, or have a time limit that they have to work under, and point out to them, if you rest, yes, you get your health back, but that's 8 hours that you're not doing anything towards completing your objective. Players are supposed to rest in dungeons because traditionally dungeons are dangerous, and the dungeon is there to, in terms of mechanics, the dungeon is there to reduce their resources so that when they get to the end of it, what would ordinarily be traditionally an easy fight is difficult because they're down hit points, they're out of spell slots, or they don't have full spell slots. They've lost equipment, they've lost healing potions. Perhaps some of the monsters from earlier in the dungeon are following them, and that's also another thing. If you do find them resting a lot, I don't normally advocate this because it's not how I like to play the game, but random encounters are a thing, and if it makes sense for a wandering monster to encounter the party, have a wandering monster encounter the party. And then it's up to you if it's up to them if they feel safe enough to restart the rest. Something to note is that if you have the encounter, wander into them, yes, they'll get hit points and spell slots back, but any equipment they use and lose, like healing potions or ammunition that's irretrievable, that's just gone. They can't get that back. So I hope that was useful. A bit, maybe. If you want me to clarify anything, please do ask. I'm not afraid to clarify. I know that I speak quickly and stumble over things occasionally. I'm going to resume what I was talking about. So attack bonus on attack roll. So obviously every monster has a plus number to hit and then a damage modifier, a damage value. So the attack bonus goes on the d20. So you roll the d20, you add the attack bonus, and that's your total to hit your player character, equal to or greater than their armor class. Sometimes player characters will try and add that to their damage roll, and with monsters it's a lot easier because you have the plus whatever to hit, and then it just gives you the damage value. No, like if you're new to DMing, then you're new to DMing. There's no shame in making mistakes. Heck, I make mistakes still, and I've been DMing this game for 2 years. just to explain to your players that you weren't aware of it. So as DM, it's easy. You just follow the numbers in the stat block, really. There is advice in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which you have to pay, which you have to buy. It's a book. But there is a free Unearthed Arcana, talks about encounter building, which gives you combat rating values for suitable encounters, which is, for building appropriate encounters for your players. For PCs to hit, yeah, that just sounds like poor rolls all around. It's like character level divided by 3 is an appropriate combat rating or something, I think. Hang on, I'll see if I can find the Unearthed Arcana. So Unearthed Arcana is a free supplement that Wizards of the Coast put out for like playtesting rules. So that isn't the final release, but it's pretty close to the rules put out in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which gives you a good idea of how many monsters are appropriate to party size and party level. PC's attack bonuses and stuff is their ability modifier plus their proficiency bonus if they're proficient with the weapon, and then their damage is the weapon damage die plus the ability modifier that you use. So most melee weapons, those that aren't labeled as finesse, that's your strength modifier. If they're labeled as finesse, you can use your dexterity modifier, and then that number is added to the damage die. My understanding, I've never done it myself because I've never had the opportunity to, but you can totally have a solo player. What you, as the DM, what you need to consider is their supporting cast, because the game is built around party play. But you can add supporting characters that kind of drop in, drop out, like characters do in books. And you can have you can obviously lower enemy hit point totals and attack damage bonus stuff as well to suit only one PC. There's probably a lot of good advice online about solo play. A lot of it usually is on Reddit, actually, of all places. Sorry, one player. Yeah, so it's definitely possible. You can actually. There is a. It's not easy, but it uses. So there are plenty of. Can't think of the right word. Programs, that's the word. Applications, what have you, that will kind of give you random mission objectives to pursue. It's not 100% one-to-one the experience if you go that way. So like the program serves as your GM, but if you go to just check the link so I'm not telling you false. I believe on the DM's Guild, yes. DM's Guild has just solo adventures that people have created for single players. I can't remember the name of the one I used to use, unfortunately. I guess it's like a yeah. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the app I used to use. They're usually more for desktop purposes, like PC. You download them. I think there's some browser-based ones. It's definitely possible to play solo. It's just finding the right keywords. Yeah, exactly. And then there are some choose your own adventure D&D books out now, if that's your style of thing as well. I will 100% address your questions, but I'm conscious that I have part of this still to discuss, so I'll divide my attention appropriately. Having a villain, considering what your villain can help explore at the tabletop in terms of theme and mood, can be a useful narrative tool. Again, you don't need to beyond they're a villain, but if you're trying to explore a particular theme or mood through your campaign, which I am, having a villain that supports that, or alternatively, acts against it, can improve the experience in some way. So, I guess really it's just a acts in accordance with / against campaign theme / mood, sorry. Or for, I guess that's technically the second point. The first point being related to the purpose of the villain. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I do. I as I say, I try to stream. Oh, hey Celtic. I try to stream on Mondays, D&D stuff, and I'm always happy to talk about D&D stuff during that stream. But I do stream other times in the week to play actual, video games and stuff. But I'm always happy to talk D&D or tabletop role playing is my passion. Always happy to help. And if you know anyone who might benefit from these streams, please do, let them know. There's no obligation for them to follow. I just want to help people, introduce people to the hobby. As I say, my website's in the... sorry, I stream from 1 p.m. my time, unfortunately, because that's just when I'm free. It all goes up on YouTube. Afterwards. I try to get them up afterwards, but it depends on how long the stream runs, obviously. Obviously, there's the Twitch archives as well. Where is the right thing? There we go. So that YouTube link is the playlist where I put all these videos up. If you want to watch them on your own time. I mean, probably. I do everything through a 5e lens because that's what I'm currently playing. But I started with 3.5, went to 4th, and I've been playing 5e since 2014 when it came out. I tried to keep it system agnostic as well, just so anyone can apply the stuff that I'm talking about. So it shouldn't really matter. There's mechanics that are different between the versions, obviously, because that's the point of versions. But I'm definitely more than happy to clarify things where I can anyway. If that answers your question. No purpose necessary. Also, Celtic, I hope you're taking notes because I fully expect you to be able to DM and be the DM for your friends at some point when you find people that will play with you. Unless your friend actually decided to start playing as a DM. I believe you mentioned a few weeks ago. no purpose necessary, but can enhance the story. Again, much of motivation. This is more of a cut and dry thing, more of a shallow, not shallow, simple answer. Like they'll either have a purpose or they won't, or you'll be able to think of one for them. Do I know good online D&D? As in somewhere where you can play D&D with other people, Roblox. If that is the case, Roll20.net is probably your best bet. That's a free point of access service where you just register for an account, and it's just a virtual tabletop, and people are all on there looking for players all the time. Oh, Celtic! I'm stealing that one. That is good. There are other services, Roblox. There's Fantasy Grounds, and yeah, it's Roll20.net. Accounts are free for players and GMs, but you can pay for benefits and stuff. There are things like Fantasy Grounds, and there's another one, maybe Hero Lab, which are paid products, like really expensive products, but they have a lot of inbuilt, like their apps, game programs, what have you. But they have a lot of support inbuilt for the games. I use Roll20 personally. I've run a game with a player who lives like 2 hours away, so it's just easier for him to dial in via Skype, and we use the virtual tabletop. Yeah, purpose, theme, mood. Very surface level. It doesn't need to be as in depth as the behaviors and the histories. And none of this needs to be terribly in depth. Again, if it's not overly prepared, it's easier to change. So example here would be the purpose of Thorn Sunchild is to demonstrate to the players that the beings calling themselves the gods aren't necessarily the gods, because he's claiming to be a god. His pawn believes that he is an avid worshipper of the god called the Pathfinder, and the Pathfinder is just this Fey Lord who's usurped power. And then the theme of the campaign. Yeah, exactly. Celtic, 100%. My players generally don't look too deep. The theme of the campaign, as far as I can kind of nail it down, is definitely 100% exploring destiny and kind of the ability of a person to change their fate, with the mood being fighting against destiny. The players are all, one way or another, kind of chosen by the gods to be their champions in a way, to free them, but they've had chosen people for millennia who have failed consistently to free them, so there's nothing special about them in a way. And then eventually all the players will reach a point where they can choose to accept their destiny and free the god, or take the god's power for themselves, and perpetuate the cycle. Thorn's theme is just power, and the corruption thereof, or the corrupting power of power. There's a horrendous way to phrase it, and I get paid to play D&D for a living. And then kind of the mood I want to build at the tabletop is kind of deceit, but he's a villain that will abide by his word. He will just find loopholes. Going to the other example of the necromancers, their purpose is to answer your question, Roblox, it's both very simple and very complicated. It's simple in that there are decades of gods created for D&D for many of their settings. A lot of the information Actually, I have the player's handbook right here, so I can quickly check to confirm that I'm not misleading you. So the player's handbook is one of the 3 core rule books, and Appendix B, page 293, is concerned with the gods of the multiverse, and that gives you just the name and what kind of that god's responsible for, and that's it. If you ask a try-hard D&D fan about a specific god, they would probably tell you conflicting information because it gets changed every edition. There is you can type in pretty much all of the gods and bring up a wiki page. Not necessarily Wikipedia, but there's like D&D wiki and stuff like that. So they have all the lore there, but equally it's a tabletop role-playing game, so you are more than welcome to throw it all out. Like 100%. I made up my own pantheon for this campaign because I knew that the quote-unquote actual gods, I'm just ignoring that facetious answer, Celtic. It is mostly combat mechanics Roblox, I will admit that. So the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide, is the more kind of world-building book. And obviously the monster manual is full of monsters. Actually, 1 second. I'll just finish this video, and I'll get back to your question about gods. So the necromancer's purpose was to demonstrate that you can trap gods, and that the gods are frail and fallible. And then theme and mood is more power and corruption thereof. Again, Roblox, I've noted your comment. I'm going to finish this and then I'll address it. So in summary, a villain, ideally, and you don't need all 4 of these, but at least 2 of them is advised to have motivation and behavior. A villain should ideally have a history, like what state they were in before the game starts, before the story starts, what they've done before to potentially establish behavioral patterns, and any relationships they have with other characters and how those are viewed. Obviously, they need a motivation, and again, there's a huge table in the DMG of motivations. Use that to drive their schemes and to inform your choices about how they'll pursue their schemes. Their behavior, obviously, is what they're doing to pursue those schemes. And that's both what they're currently doing, what they might do in the future, and how they react to PCs interacting with their scheming, and how they'll alter their plans to accommodate those things. And then the purpose, the theme and the mood, is less important, but it's more there for flavor, in my opinion, and can drive the feeling of the story in ways that actions might not necessarily be able to. It's more something that will evolve through play than anything else. But having, as I say, the motivation and the behavior of a villain will help you create a villain that the players hopefully enjoy encountering at the tabletop, and then having the history to them and a defined kind of feel around the villain through their purpose or their theme or mood will make them grounded in the world and believable. And kind of that, having all those 4 things work together is the holy grail of creating a villain. You want someone that the players generally want to stop, really, rather than just someone that, oh yeah, they did that thing, we should probably deal with it. I'm hoping by the time that the players get there, they loathe Tharn and they want to stop him from existing, ideally, but from following through on his plans. So that's everything I wanted to talk about today. I'm going to wrap up the YouTube stuff now, but I'll hang around on Twitch and answer questions from chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do click that subscribe button to know when I upload more. I stream these D&D videos on Mondays on Twitch at Comrade Bubbles. If you want to come by and ask questions, interact with chat, what have you. It's a nice community. Again, if you want to watch all this on YouTube afterwards, it's up on YouTube. The link's somewhere in chat, and it's in the description below the video player on Twitch. I'm on Twitter at Comrade Bubbles, where I just post when I'm going live because that seems like a good thing to do. But YouTube for now. Thank you for watching. I hope it's useful. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. I do try to read them. Have a good one.